Every night I read the newspaper before bed. I know it sounds archaic, trust me, but it's really one of the best ways to get up-to-date news anymore. Watching news on the TV is fine and all, but sometimes the visuals that accompany it are just a bit too much for my constitution. I'm just better suited for reading it than seeing it, I guess. After my evening ritual of reading the newspaper, I set the paper down on the end table and click on the small radio I kept there for entertainment purposes. I step over to the bookshelf, slipped my reading material for the night, and sat down at the couch with my dog. I know. What is this, the 50s? Was I smoking a pipe and drinking scotch in my house slippers? The answer is no, I was not. To be honest, I was reading a trashy zombie novel and hoping that I wouldn't get called into work tonight, but I already had a sneaking suspicion that it was unavoidable. Still, I had hope that the most strenuous part of my evening would be reading my book and absently petting my furry friend's floppy ears. I guess the dog had other plans. He stood up from the couch, stretched a bit, and hopped down into the kitchen. I figured he might be onto something, so I followed him. When he plopped down on the ground in front of his food bowl, I realized that he wasn't the only one that was hungry. I'd forgotten to eat. I'd been so busy with work this week that finding time to eat was difficult. That was one downside to this new job. The hours were erratic. I never knew when I was going to get a call for work. Sometimes it would be only a few hours notice and for maybe 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Others, it would be working for 2 days straight. It really just depended on the demand. The season affected that demand, strangely enough. I made a sandwich and sat down at the small kitchen table. I was fairly content with my housing arrangement. I mean, it was one of the perks provided by the company. I lived in a duplex with another employee. I had the top floor with access to the attic. He had the bottom floor with access to the basement. We started around the same time, coincidentally. Our jobs were fundamentally the same. Now that I think about it. All in all, the accommodations were pretty swanky. It was an old house, but the inside was lavishly appointed. I had a fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment to myself in the ritzier part of the city. That by itself is a rarity, but the fact that the company paid for it, I'd be a fool not to take them up on that offer. Although, to be fair, I never slept well in there. When I wanted a good night's sleep, I had to rent a hotel room and crash there for a day or two. Being on call makes it difficult to sleep soundly, but in a hotel room by myself, I'd sleep like the dead. Anyway, I finished my sandwich and made my way back to the living room. It was far and away the nicest place I've ever lived. It had 2 plush leather couches lining adjacent walls with a wood-burning fireplace set between them. The room had a huge rug covering the original wooden floor in the center and deep red drapes that hung loosely over the window. Opposite the couches sat an antique record player, complete with a set of vinyls that came with the apartment. There was even a decanter and a couple of tumblers sitting on top of it. Overall, pretty classy, right? The hallway led from the living room down to the bedrooms, to the bathroom, and the entrance to the attic. I walked down the hall, careful to avoid the sconces jutting from the sides. At this point in the night, the hall always seemed to go on forever. But tonight, it felt especially long as I dragged my feet all the way down it. My dog Raphael following close behind. Raphael and I hopped into the bed. I didn't even bother changing, because I just knew that I was going to get called in for work. I had been asleep maybe 20 minutes when I heard the screaming. Raphael beat me out the door, but I was close behind. We made our way down the hallway and burst into the living room to find her. Well, find them, I guess. 3 little girls were bouncing on one of my couches, the youngest screaming at the top of her lungs. See? I told you. I was going to get called in. When I finally got them to stop their squealing, I crouched on my haunches and addressed them. "Hello, girls," I said in my friendliest voice. "I thought you might be stopping by tonight." "Who are you?" The tallest girl practically screamed at me without breaking her bouncing tempo on the couch. "You're not our normal babysitter." "Where's Hannah?" The youngest girl chimed in. "You're right. I'm not," I answered. "That's very observant of you. My name's Pete. I'm taking over for Hannah tonight." Why, shouted the youngest girl again. I jokingly stroked my chin and thought for a second before responding. "Well, your parents said Hannah was busy tonight, and besides, from what I hear, at Hannah's last babysitting job, She forgot about some popcorn in the microwave, and the whole house smelled like burnt popcorn. How gross is that? All three of them met with the same collective, "Ew!" That seemed to rattle Paul Raphael to the bones. He hopped onto the other couch and watched the rambunctious children slowly tear apart my apartment. "Let's do this," I began. "I'm Pete. What are your names?" The eldest girl stopped bouncing and stood up as tall as she could. "I'm Samantha," she exclaimed. "And these are my sisters, Caitlin and Stephanie." With those last two's names, she pointed to her sister, Caitlin, the youngest, and Stephanie, the quieter middle child. Once introductions have been made, they went right back to bouncing away on my furniture. I was going to be more than a little pissed if I had to replace the couches, but it wasn't really important at the moment. "Well, okay, Samantha, you seem to be in charge here. So how about you help me out?" Samantha, who was probably around 10 or so, was more than happy to be given a little responsibility after being named the leader. She jumped back down from the couch and stood in front of me. Still crouched, I was just below eye level with her. "How about you go into the kitchen and make some snacks for us? I'm going to start setting up beds for everyone. Does that sound good?" "No sleep! No sleep! No sleep!" chanted the other two girls from the couch. Samantha nodded quickly and sprinted into the kitchen. I could hear her rifling through the drawers and the fridge to figure out what to eat. I always kept the food pretty well stocked, just in case I got late night visitors like this. With Samantha occupied, I had a little more free rein to try and calm the other two down. I grabbed a couple of pillows from Raphael's couch and scattered them on the floor. I went into the guest room, grabbed the spare mattresses, and dragged them out into the living room. They wouldn't all fit in one bed, but I couldn't imagine splitting them up would have been a good idea. Two could share the bed, but one of them would have to sleep on the couch. "Okay, girls!" I shouted over them, trying to walk the line between peppy and authoritative. "How about we play a game?" Caitlin and Stephanie jumped down from the couch and started running in circles around me, shouting out their favorite games. Unfortunately, I didn't really have a lot to choose from, but I walked over to the bookcase and showed them the few that I had. They were just about to choose one when I heard a crash in the kitchen. "I'll be right back," I blurted over my shoulder as I rushed into the kitchen to see what had happened. Samantha was on the stool, struggling to reach the top shelf of one of the cabinets. I stepped in and scooped her off right as the stool fell to the side and a plate crashed to the ground. "I'm sorry," she mumbled as I set her down. "It's okay. I'm just glad you're all right." The screaming in the other room intensified, so Samantha and I hurried to see what all the commotion was about. "I saw a ghost!" screamed Caitlin. She was pointing down the hallway and covering her mouth. "Don't be silly," chided Samantha. She walked down the hallway with Raphael close behind and came back with nothing to report. "It's just a hallway." "That it is," I agreed. "Now, you three start the game and I'll finish with the snacks." Samantha's face turned a shade redder, but she didn't say anything. She just sat down with her sisters and started setting up the board game for Candyland. By the time I had returned with the food, they'd already begun without me. "You took too long!" sputtered Caitlin from a mouth of potato chips from a bowl I had set down on the table. The other two girls were too focused on the game to notice the various chips and treats I had brought out. I grabbed a cookie and sat down on the couch, content to watch them play. I even turned on the radio for a bit of background music. After a couple of rounds of Candyland, Samantha decided it was bedtime for the three of them. So I made the bed on the mattresses, and I dragged out and set up one of the couches. Caitlin hopped up onto the couch and pulled the blankets over her. Raphael jumped up next to her, cuddling close to keep her warm in the increasingly chilly apartment. Samantha excused herself to the bathroom as Stephanie tugged on my t-shirt. "I'm afraid to go to sleep," she whispered. "What about the ghosts?" I crouched down and ruffled her hair a bit. "You don't have anything to worry about. If there are any ghosts here, they won't bother you. I'll make sure of it." I gave her a reassuring smile and gestured toward the bed on the floor. "Now, you should lie down. You three have a big day tomorrow, and you're going to need your sleep." Stephanie seemed to acquiesce and carefully got into bed. I realized that in my haste I'd forgotten blankets, so I walked down to my room and grabbed all the blankets I could. I cracked open the door to the attic and the bathroom, turning the lights on in both to act as nightlights, and returning with an armful of blankets. I scattered them amongst the beddings. Radio static cut through the quiet of the room. Just another thing I had forgotten to do. I stepped over Stephanie's sleeping body and snatched the radio off the table. I clicked the dial to off, but the static continued. "Not again," I grumbled as I flipped it over and unclipped the battery cover. I removed the batteries, but the static continued pouring through the speakers. "Great." I turned the volume down as low as possible and brought the radio to my room, shutting the door as I left. I could barely make out the sound of claws clicking on wood upstairs over the static. In a panic, I shouted, "Raphael!" A few seconds later, my goofy dog popped his head in the hallway to check on me. "Oh, thank God," I whispered as I patted his head and scratched his ears. He wagged his tail a couple more times and walked back into the living room to resume his vigil on the couch. A horrible, metallic grinding noise began emitting from the kitchen. I ran to the kitchen as fast as I could, careful to avoid the sleeping girls. "Samantha!" I shouted when I entered the kitchen. But there was no one there. The dishwasher was shaking violently in its port. I opened it, terrified that something or someone had gotten into it and shut themselves in. Thankfully, the washer was empty. "I'm sorry," whispered a voice behind me. I spun around to see Samantha standing behind me, her head hanging low. I'll admit, she had startled me, but I smiled in hopes that she didn't notice. "What are you sorry for, sweetie?" I intoned as I knelt in front of her. "I think I made the dishwasher do that," she responded. She was on the verge of tears, but doing her best to hold them in. "Samantha, do you know?" She nodded once, and the tears started flowing freely. I opened my arms and brought the little girl into a hug. She convulsed with tears as her sobbing racked her entire body. She alternated from stifled sobs to wailing as she clutched at my shirt and cried into my shoulder and chest. All I could do was stroke her hair and hope that she'd calm down. "Shh," I cooed. "We have to try and keep it down. You might wake your sisters. You don't want that, do you?" Samantha looked up at me and wiped away some of her tears with the back of her hand. She shook her head dejectedly and sniffled loudly. "Good. Did you have fun tonight?" She nodded in an affirmative, a small smile cracking her otherwise depressed countenance. "I'm glad. That's my favorite part of my job. Are you ready?" She nodded once more. My stomach was churning, and my chest tightened as her hand slipped into mine. We walked back into the living room. I gently woke the sleeping girls. Caitlin and Stephanie groggily made their way to their feet and stood facing me and Samantha. "What's going on?" Caitlin mumbled. I didn't say anything, but extended my other hand to her. She grabbed it and gripped Stephanie's too. Silently, the four of us walked down the hallway. The light from the attic was almost blinding as we made our way through the darkness. I swear the static from the radio got louder as we passed my room. I opened the attic door wide and knelt down by the girls. I wrapped them all in a bear hug. I gave Samantha a reassuring smile as she started up the stairs with her sisters behind. I closed the door behind them, slid the bolt lock into place. I turned and placed my back against the cold wooden door, sliding down to the ground. Raphael came to join me as I started bawling. He did his best to cheer me up, but I knew that nothing was going to help tonight. The static from the radio stopped as my sobbing filled the newfound silence. I walked back into the living room and started cleaning up the mess. Once the living room was back in order, I fell back onto the couch and picked up my book again. But I couldn't read it. Not with the newspaper sitting on the table, beckoning me to read the front page story just one last time. I unfolded the paper and read aloud for Raphael's sake. "Here it is, buddy. House fire in Springfield. Leaves 3 dead, 1 injured." I didn't make it through the first paragraph. I crumbled the paper up and threw it on the ground before crying myself to sleep.